Imagine for a second you're standing on a coastline. It's a perfect Tuesday. The sky is clear, the water is calm, everything feels completely fine.
Objectively fine, yeah.
And then your phone buzzes. You look down, it's a notification from, say, the National Hurricane Center, and it says in exactly 7 days, the barometric pressure is going to plummet. The wind shear is going to align in this perfect, terrifying way. And a Category 4 storm is going to make landfall on the exact spot where you're standing.
But you look around and there's nothing, not a cloud, not a breath of wind.
Nothing at all.
Yeah.
But you pack your bags, you board up the windows, you leave.
Yeah.
And my question is, why do you do that?
Well, because you trust the physics.
You trust the physics. Exactly. You trust that by measuring things, pressure, temperature, wind speed, we can, with a pretty high degree of accuracy, calculate the future state of the atmosphere.
And we've completely normalized that idea. I mean, we plan our cities, our supply chains, everything around the ability to predict these massive, chaotic systems in the sky.
We rely on that grace period between the prediction and the event itself. It's a survival mechanism.
It is.
Okay, so that makes perfect sense for air and water.
Yeah.
Physical things we can measure. But for today's deep dive, I want to take that exact same logic and apply it to something that feels, well, infinitely more personal and messy.
Your own mind.
My own mind. The whole premise of the huge stack of research we're digging into today is this. What if we could do the exact same thing for a mental health crisis?
Not just a vague feeling, but a real forecast.
Right. What if a depressive episode or a manic spike or even a severe panic attack could be forecasted, say, 7 days out? Not by a gut feeling or a therapist noticing you look tired.
But by raw mathematics.
And that, I have to admit, is where I start to get a little skeptical.
I can see why.
Because the weather is data. My mood, that's me. It's feelings. It's a fight I had this morning. It's messy. It's completely irrational sometimes. Are you telling me that research suggests my anxiety follows the same mathematical rules as a tropical depression? It feels, a little reductive.
It sounds reductive if you think of math as just, rigid numbers and simple equations. But if you actually look at the source material we've got, especially the work from Floris Takens and this new field they're calling computational psychiatry, the argument is actually the exact opposite.
The opposite of reductive.
Yes. They argue that because your emotions are messy and complex and chaotic, they must follow the rules of dynamical systems. The chaos isn't random. It has a shape.
The chaos has a shape.
Okay.
I like that phrase. I don't know if I fully buy it yet, but I like it.
Well, the whole mission of this deep dive is to see if we can get you there. We're going to look at how these mathematicians and psychologists are trying to build what they call a skeleton of mental health.
A skeleton.
Yeah.
So the underlying structure.
Exactly. We're trying to move away from just looking at the surface level symptoms, I feel sad, I can't sleep, and start mapping the invisible geometric structures that are actually driving those feelings.
Then we have a pretty wild stack of sources to get through to do that.
Oh, it's a beast. We've got these foundational topology papers that are, frankly, very dense. We've got Takens' specific work on singularities, which we will absolutely have to break down.
Please.
And then we've got very recent real-world case studies on things like bipolar disorder that are using these exact models to predict relapses.
And it feels like there's a bigger philosophical shift happening here, too. Right?
It's huge. We're moving from this one-size-fits-all model of diagnosis where you get a label like major depressive disorder and a standard pill.
And you hope for the best.
And you hope for the best. We're moving from that to something they call person-centered data. And I want to be really clear about this. The goal isn't to replace the human therapist with an algorithm.
Thank you. That was my next question.
No, the goal is to use math to listen better, to validate that a patient's complex lived experience isn't just noise. It's a valid, mappable, geometric trajectory.
Okay, so if we're going to map this trajectory, we have to start with the basics of the map itself. And the sources all seem to come back to this central analogy of the wind.
Yes, absolutely. Takens' whole framework really depends on this concept of a vector field. So let's just strip away all the psychology and biology for a second.
Okay.
Imagine your mind, your consciousness, your mood, your energy, your focus as a vast landscape,
Yeah.
terrain.
I could do that. I'm picturing, hills and valleys, maybe some plains.
Perfect. Now, across this entire landscape, there's a wind that's always blowing. And this wind represents the flow of your internal state. It's the rate of change.
So if I'm getting more energetic, the wind is blowing me up a hill.
Exactly. Up the energy axis. If you're spiraling into a sad mood, the wind is blowing you down into one of those valleys. In mathematics, a vector field is just a rule that assigns an arrow a vector to every single point on that map.
An arrow that tells you the direction and the speed of the wind at that exact spot.
Precisely. So at any given moment, you are standing somewhere on this map of your mind, and the arrow at your feet tells you where you're going next, the tendency.
Okay, that makes sense.
But here is where it gets really interesting. Takens and the other topologists, they aren't actually that interested in the places where the wind is blowing hard.
Really? That seems like the most important part.
Well, if the wind is blowing at 100 miles an hour, you already know where you're going. You're changing. The interesting part, the part that defines the entire system, is what happens when the wind stops.
The calm, the eye of the storm,
Or just
detonation.
mathematically, this is a point where the vector field, which we can call x, vanishes. The equation is simply x of 0 equals 0.
There's zero. Now, to a layperson like me, zero means nothing. It's a void. It means I'm taking a nap, nothing is happening.
And that's the fundamental mistake we all make. To a mathematician, that stopping point is the most critical feature of the entire landscape. That's what they call a singularity.
A singularity.
It's not nothing, it's the destination. Think about a leaf caught in that wind. It swirls around, it gets tossed about, but eventually it settles somewhere. It lands in a spot where the wind is 0. Where it settles defines the entire dynamic of the system.
So these stopping points, these singularities, are the states we get stuck in.
That's it, precisely. In psychology, we have a name for them. We call them attractors. A deep clinical depression is a perfect example of what mathematicians would call a stable sink.
A stable sink?
Yes. Think of a drain in a bathtub. The wind, the vectors blow you toward it from every direction on the landscape. And once you're at the very center, at the singularity where the wind stops, you're stuck. You have 0 momentum to get out.
That actually explains so much about the subjective feeling of depression.
How so?
Well, people always say things like, just snap at or just get up and do something. But if you're at a singularity where the vector is literally 0, you can't just get moving. The physics of your own mind has stalled you out. There's no wind to push you.
That is a perfect translation. But this brings us to the big problem the researchers faced. Real life is incredibly noisy. If we look at your wind today, it's not some clean mathematical function. It's being affected by the coffee you drank, the traffic on your commute, a weird email you got, how much sleep you had last night.
All of it. It's a mess.
It's a total mess. If we just look at the raw data of your mood, it looks like a scribble. So how do we know if you're stuck in a true depressive singularity, a stable sink, or if you're just having a really bad Tuesday?
We need to somehow see through all that noise.
We need to find the skeleton, the underlying mathematical structure that exists regardless of the random noise of daily life.
Yeah.
And Takens' work gives us this amazing toolkit to do just that.
Okay.
The papers highlight 3 main tools. They have these sci-fi sounding names: the germ, the K-jet, and a technique called blowing up.
All right. They do sound like weapons from a space opera.
Right.
Let's start with the germ. It sounds biological, but I'm guessing it's not.
Not at all. It's a purely topological concept. The germ is all about the idea of local validity. The best analogy is just cropping a photograph.
Cropping a photo. Okay.
Let's say you have a huge satellite photo of an entire city. It's massive. But you're only interested in analyzing a specific traffic accident at one single intersection.
Right.
Do you need to know what the traffic is like 10 miles away on the other side of town?
No, of course not. It's totally irrelevant.
It's irrelevant, but in math, you have to prove that it's irrelevant. The germ is the formal mathematical way of saying, I am drawing a tiny, tiny circle around the singularity. Maybe it's only a millimeter wide in our model. And I'm defining the entire function only by what happens inside this little circle.
So you're just ignoring everything else, the edges of the universe.
You're ignoring the global behavior to focus intensely on the local behavior.
And in therapy, this is a bit like ignoring a patient's entire childhood for a moment to focus on what's happening right now.
That's a great way to put it. It's saying, look, I don't need to analyze your relationship with your mother from 20 years ago to understand the fundamental mechanics of the panic attack you're having right now. The germ justifies focusing our lens on the immediate neighborhood of the crisis.
Okay, so we've cropped the photo, we're zoomed in on the intersection, but the photo's still a bit blurry, right? The data is still messy. That must be where the second tool comes in. the K-jet.
Exactly. And this is one of my favorite concepts in the whole stack because it's so beautifully practical. The K-jet is all about the power of approximation. It's based on this idea of ignoring the infinitesimal.
Ignoring the infinitesimal. That sounds, I don't know, a little dangerous. Don't we want all the accuracy we can get?
We want structural accuracy, not necessarily pixel perfect, numerical accuracy. Imagine you're looking at a graph of someone's self-reported mood over a week.
Okay, it's going to be jagged, spikes up and down every hour. A mess.
A total mess. If you try to write an equation that captures every single one of those tiny wiggles, you'll go insane. The equation would be a mile long.
So the K-jet smooths it out.
In a way, more accurately, it identifies the dominant trend. Mathematically, what it does is it replaces that messy, infinitely complex function with a simple polynomial of degree k. Usually something simple like x squared or x cubed.
Oh, interesting.
It's asking a simpler question. At its core, at this exact point, is this function a simple curve going up, a parabola going down, or maybe a saddle shape? It gets rid of the noise.
It's like squinting at an impressionist painting. You lose the individual brushstrokes, the infinitesimals, but you suddenly see the subject. You see the bridge or the water lilies.
That's a perfect analogy. You strip away all the high-order terms in the equation, which represent the noise, and you're left with what's called the jet. And the jet is essentially the derivative profile at the origin. It tells you the fundamental nature of the problem without getting distracted by all the irrelevant details.
So we've zoomed in with the germ and we've smoothed out the picture with the K-jet. But the papers mention that sometimes you run into something called a degenerate singularity, which, frankly, sounds like a pretty harsh insult.
It does, doesn't it? Sorry to inform you, you have a degenerate singularity. But in math, degenerate just means lacking distinctness or collapsed. Imagine you're looking at that traffic accident again. But this time you're looking at a tiny roundabout from a satellite directly overhead. But the roundabout is really small and your camera resolution is really low. So on your screen, it just looks like a single dot, a single pixel.
All right, I see a dot.
Now tell me, is the traffic in that roundabout flowing clockwise? Is it flowing counterclockwise? Is traffic flowing into the dot or away from it?
I have no idea. I can't tell. It's just a pixel.
That is a degenerate singularity. All the directional information, all the structure has been crushed into a single point. And the K-jet can't help you because the derivative is zero. There's no slope to measure. You're completely blind to the underlying structure.
So we're stuck. We can't analyze it.
We would be. Unless we use the third tool, blowing up.
Which sounds like we're just going to destroy it.
It's the exact opposite, actually. We expand it. Blowing up is a very specific geometric technique where we take that single point, that dot, and we mathematically replace it with a sphere. Or, in a 2D case, a circle, we essentially introduce a new dimension.
Wait. How do you replace a point with a sphere? A point has no dimensions.
You do it by shifting your coordinate system. Instead of thinking in terms of x and y location, you shift to polar coordinates thinking in terms of radius and angle. Imagine zooming in on that dot with a microscope that has infinite power. As you zoom in, the dot expands and resolves into a ring.
I see.
Suddenly, you're not looking at a single location anymore. You're looking at all the directions surrounding that original location.
So the dot becomes the roundabout again.
Yes, the dot becomes the roundabout. And once it's a roundabout, you can see the arrows again. You can see the flow. You can say, oh, the mood is actually spiraling into the center, or it's a saddle point. It's flowing past the center. By blowing up the singularity, we resolve the hidden complexity that was invisible before.
So there's a trade-off. We lose the simplicity of the single point.
Right, we lose what's called smoothness or differentiability at that one point.
But we gain clarity. We gain the ability to see the structure.
We gain the structure. And to link this back to the mind, this is all about seeing the pattern inside the stagnation. A patient might look stuck, just flat, unresponsive, catatonic almost, a degenerate state.
Right.
But if we use the right analytical tools, if we blow up the analysis by looking at more variables or higher order dynamics, we might find that inside that stuckness, there is a furious high-speed cycle of rumination. They're looping on a single thought over and over.
So they aren't still at all.
They're not still, they're just spiraling at incredible speed, but the loop is so tight that from the outside it just looks like a dot.
That is a genuinely terrifying image. It's like running a marathon inside a phone booth.
It's often what severe anxiety or a mixed state bipolar episode feels like. And without these mathematical tools, we would completely miss it. We'd just see the dot.
Okay, so this is incredible. We have the math, We have the wind, which are the vector fields. We have the stopping points, the singularities. And we have our toolkit, the germs, the jets, the blowing up. But here's the practical question. Patients don't walk into a clinic and hand their therapist a vector field.
No, they don't.
They hand them a survey. They say, I feel like a 4 out of 10 today. How do we bridge that enormous gap between a subjective feeling and this high-level topology?
This is the magic trick of the whole field, and it's why Floris Takens is so central to this work. The bridge is a concept called state-space reconstruction, or SSR, and it all relies on a landmark theorem, the Takens embedding theorem.
Okay, is this the theorem that basically claims you can rebuild a whole complex system just by watching one tiny part of it?
That's the one, and it sounds like pure alchemy, I know. The theorem states that if you have a time series of just one single variable, let's say you record your mood on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe 5 times a day for a month.
Just one number.
Just that one stream of numbers. From that alone, you can reconstruct the geometry of the entire system that produced it.
I don't understand how that's possible. My mood is affected by my sleep, my diet, my stress level, my hormones, a dozen other things. If I only measure mood, aren't I missing all those other crucial variables?
You're missing the direct measurement of them, but you are not missing their effect.
What's the difference?
Because the system is coupled, meaning everything affects everything else. The data from your mood already contains the echoes, the ghosts of all those other variables. If your sleep quality drops one night, your mood the next day wiggles in a certain way. That wiggle is recorded in your mood data.
So the ghost of the sleep data is haunting the mood data.
It's a perfect way to put it.
Right.
The information is already embedded in there. Takens showed that by taking that single flat string of numbers and applying a simple trick called time delays, it's basically just comparing your mood right now to your mood yesterday and your mood the day before yesterday. By plotting those 3 numbers against each other in a 3D graph, you can unfold that flat line back into its original multidimensional shape. You can literally rebuild the attractor.
You can see the landscape again.
You can see the landscape, and once you have that shape, that reconstructed state space, you can start diagnosing the geometry.
Right. We talked about attractors being these sinks for depression, but I assume there are other shapes, other geometric diagnoses.
Oh, absolutely. This brings us to the concept of normal forms. In mathematics, a normal form is the simplest possible equation that still describes a particular behavior. In computational psychology, it's essentially the structural diagnosis.
So instead of getting a label like bipolar disorder, my diagnosis might be an equation.
In a research context, yes, it's moving in that direction. We might analyze your reconstructed state space and find that your mood generally follows a damped oscillator, normal form.
A damped oscillator.
It means that when something bad happens, your mood swings down, then it swings back up a little past the baseline, and it wobbles back to the center and stabilizes.
That sounds healthy. That sounds like resilience.
That is the mathematical definition of resilience. But we might find another person has a chaotic attractor, sometimes called a strange attractor. Their normal form might be a classic Lorentz attractor, the famous butterfly shape.
The butterfly effect.
Right. And for this person, their mood never settles. It orbits around 2 main wings of the butterfly. Maybe one wing is high energy and the other wing is irritable anxiety. And they flip unpredictably from one to the other. They never find a stable center.
And their normal is to be in constant, unpredictable motion.
Exactly. And this leads to another really important distinction in the reading, which was the difference between CR equivalence and weak equivalence. It felt like a deep point about the journey versus the destination.
That is the perfect way to frame it. CR equivalence is a very strict mathematical term. It means 2 systems are identical in almost every way. The paths, the speeds, the timing. It's a carbon copy. The vector fields are basically the same, which, when you're talking about humans, is basically impossible. No 2 people have the exact same life story, the same brain chemistry, the same day.
It's impossible. You and I might both get depressed after a bad event, but your mood might crash in a single day while mine slides down slowly over a month. Our trajectories are different. We are not CR equivalent.
But
we might be weakly equivalent.
which means we both end up in the same ditch at the bottom of the hill.
Correct. Weak equivalence is a topological concept. It's qualitative. It ignores the timing and the exact path and asks a simpler question. Do both of these systems end up in the same kind of destination? Do they both have a stable sink at the bottom of the graph? If the answer is yes, they are weakly equivalent.
And for a therapist, that's really what matters, isn't it?
It's everything. The therapist doesn't need to know if you took the scenic route or the direct highway to get to the depressive episode. They need to know that the destination, the depression, is a sink and not a saddle point. They need to understand the shape of the trap you're in so they can help you figure out how to climb out.
It's really fascinating because it strips away so much of the narrative we usually associate with mental health. We think of it as a story. I am sad because X happened to me.
Right.
But this view says you are sad because the geometry of your state space has a very deep hole in it and you fell in. The X was just the nudge that sent you over the edge.
It creates this objective skeleton of the pathology. But, skeletons need muscles and a nervous system to actually move and interact with the world. And individual minds don't just exist in a vacuum.
No, we interact with each other.
We do. And this is where the reading and the outline pivoted to what it called these advanced theoretical frameworks, which at first felt like a bit of a left turn.
I agree. The jump to synergetics, and this physicist Hermann Haken caught me off guard. We were deep in the math of a single mind, and suddenly we're talking about order parameters and slaving principles. It sounded, well, honestly, it sounded a little authoritarian.
It does have that ring to it, the slaving principle. But Haken was a physicist studying how complex systems, like lasers, spontaneously organize themselves. So think about it this way. We've been talking about my vector field. Now let's imagine my vector field interacting with your vector field.
Like what we're doing in this very conversation.
Exactly. We, together, have formed a new temporary system. Haken's theory of synergetics is all about exploring how the individual, chaotic parts of us spontaneously create a higher-level group order. He called this the order parameter.
Okay, so what would be the order parameter of this conversation we're having?
It might be the flow, the shared rhythm. Have you ever noticed when you're really in sync with someone, you start nodding at the same time, your vocal pitches start to mirror each other, you finish each other's sentences?
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like you're on the same wavelength.
That wavelength, that synchronization, is the order parameter. It's a macroscopic pattern that emerges from our microscopic interactions. And here's the crazy part, the slaving principle. Once that shared rhythm is established, it begins to slave the parts. You stop consciously choosing when to nod. The system of the conversation starts driving your nodding behavior.
Wow. So the conversation itself takes on life of its own and starts pulling the strings of the people who are having it.
Precisely. And this applies directly to mental health. A powerful mood can become an order parameter. Imagine anxiety is the order parameter for your mind today. It emerges from a bunch of small, fearful thoughts. But once it forms into a cohesive state, it enslaves your perception.
How so?
You see a neutral face on the street, but the anxiety order parameter forces you to interpret it as a threat, as judgment. You hear a car backfire, and it forces you to perceive it as a gunshot. You are being slaved by the very pattern you helped create.
So you get trapped inside the robot that you built.
It's a perfect description. And that leads directly to the next framework mentioned, which is perceptual control theory, or PCT, which takes that idea and flips it on its head. PCT says that behavior isn't about producing an output, it's about controlling an input.
Okay, that sounds a little counterintuitive.
The classic analogy is a thermostat. A thermostat doesn't behave by blowing hot air. It behaves by controlling its perception of the room's temperature.
I see. Its goal is to make what it senses match its internal setting.
Exactly. And PCT argues that's what all living things do. We have an internal reference value, a goal. I want to feel safe. I want to feel competent. And all of our behavior is an attempt to act on the world in a way that makes our perception match that reference value. In the language we've been using, that reference value is the attractor.
But thermostats can break? Or what happens if you have two thermostats in the same room set to different temperatures?
Conflict. Deep structural conflict. And that's PCT's model for psychological distress. What happens when you have two equally important reference values that require opposite actions?
Give me an example.
I want to be safe and avoid all risks, which means staying home. And I want to be loved and connected, which means going to the party.
You can't do both.
You can't do both. The system is in conflict. It wobbles. It can't satisfy both attractors at the same time. This creates what PCT calls reorganization. The system becomes unstable, the vector field goes haywire, and the mind frantically tries to rewire its own structure to solve this fundamental paradox. And that process of chaotic reorganization, that's often what a mental breakdown is.
It's a forced system update that's gone horribly wrong.
Or maybe gone right in the long term. It's the system trying to heal itself from an impossible situation.
Okay, this theory is getting very heavy. But I want to try to ground this again. We've got the foundational math from Takens. We have these high-level theories like synergetics and PCT.
Yeah.
Now let's look at the actual models that are being used today and what the outline calls computational psychiatry. It highlights three big ones: network theory, dynamical systems, and reinforcement learning.
These really are the three pillars of the modern practical application of all this theory.
Let's start with network theory. This one really resonated with me because it seems to challenge the whole idea of having a disease in the first place.
It completely flips the traditional medical model on its head. The old model, the latent variable model, says you have a thing inside you, a hidden entity called depression. And that latent variable causes symptoms like insomnia, fatigue, and sadness.
Right, just like a flu virus is the latent variable that causes the symptoms of a fever and a cough.
Exactly. And the logic follows. If you can kill the virus, the fever will go away. But with mental health, network theory asks a very awkward question. Where exactly is the depression? We've never found a depression tumor in a brain scan or a single depression gene.
So what's the alternative?
Network theory argues that depression isn't a hidden cause. The depression is the network of symptoms.
Wait, the symptoms are the disease?
The structure of the symptoms is the disease. The way they connect to and cause each other is the disease. Think of it like a row of dominoes.
Okay, simple enough. One falls, they all fall in a chain reaction.
But it's worse than that. Imagine it's not a row, but a circle of dominoes that are somehow rigged to stand each other back up so they can fall over again forever.
Oh, that's nightmare.
It is. Imagine you have insomnia. That's symptom 1. Because you're exhausted all the time, you have trouble concentrating at work. That's symptom 2. Because you can't concentrate, you make a mistake, and your boss gets angry, which makes you feel worthless. That's symptom 3. And because you feel worthless, you lie awake at night ruminating on your failures.
Which causes the insomnia. Symptom 1 again.
Ooh. The loop closes. In this model, the symptoms cause each other. It's a self-sustaining web. There is no single underlying cause to treat anymore. The network itself is the cause.
So how on earth do you treat a web? You can't give a pill to a network.
No, but you can analyze its structure. Use graph theory to look for the hub, the most central, most connected node in that specific person's network.
The keystone symptom.
The keystone symptom. For one person, the mathematical hub of their depression network might be insomnia. If you can successfully treat just their sleep, the concentration comes back online, their work improves, the feelings of worthlessness fade, the whole network collapses.
But for somebody else with the exact same diagnosis.
For someone else, the hub might be rumination. You can give them all the sleeping pills in the world, but if their mind is still caught in that looping thought pattern, the network will just repair itself and keep the depression going.
That is the absolute definition of personalized medicine, isn't it? It's not take this antidepressant because you have depression. It's let's analyze your specific network topology and strategically cut the single most critical wire.
That's the goal. Now, the second model, dynamical systems, we've touched on a lot, but we need to talk specifically about the landscape model, especially as it's used for bipolar disorder.
This is the double well potential model you mentioned earlier.
Right. So imagine again a ball rolling on a curvy surface. For bipolar disorder, the model has 2 deep bowls, or wells. The one on the left represents a depressive state. The one on the right represents a manic state.
Okay, depression and mania are 2 valleys, so what's a normal mood?
In the middle, between the 2 valleys, there's a ridge. That ridge is what they call euthymia, which is just the clinical term for a normal, stable mood.
So to stay healthy, you have to balance precariously on top of this ridge. That sounds stressful.
Well, in a healthy person, that middle ground isn't a ridge at all. It's actually a third, shallow valley. It's stable, you sit comfortably in the middle. But in the model for bipolar disorder, the landscape itself is dynamic. It can change.
And a bifurcation can occur.
A bifurcation, a fork in the road.
A fundamental shift in the geometry of the system. Under certain stresses, the landscape shifts. Suddenly, that stable middle valley rises up. It flattens out, and then it becomes a hill, a sharp ridge.
So the ball?
Yeah.
You literally can't stay in the middle anymore.
You can't. Gravity takes over. The very geometry of your mindscape forces the ball to roll down into either the depression well or the mania well. You are forced into an episode not because of a failure of willpower, but because the stable ground beneath you has literally disappeared.
And this is where the whole hurricane forecast idea comes back in with a vengeance.
Yeah.
Because a whole landscape doesn't just shift instantly, does it? There must be warning signs.
There are. And this leads us to what is arguably the single most important and practical concept in this entire deep dive. Critical slowing down.
Critical slowing down. Okay, break that down for us. It sounds important.
It's a universal property of complex systems as they approach a tipping point. Imagine that ball sitting in a nice, deep, stable valley. If you poke it, what happens?
It rolls up the side a little bit and then rolls right back to the bottom.
Quickly.
Yeah, pretty fast. It settles quickly.
That's a stable, resilient system, high resilience. But now imagine that the valley starts to flatten out. It's slowly transforming into that unstable ridge. It's becoming less of a bowl and more of a flat tabletop. Now you poke the ball with the same amount of force.
It rolls back, but much more slowly.
Yeah.
It might wander around for a bit before it finally settles in the middle.
Exactly. It's sluggish. Its recovery time has increased dramatically. That sluggishness, that increase in the time it takes to recover from small, everyday shocks, is the direct mathematical signature that the system is losing its stability. It is the fire alarm going off before you can see the flames.
So if we translate that,
Yeah.
if a patient is getting, say, a little grumpy about minor things, and it used to take them 10 minutes to shake it off, but now it's taken them 3 hours to get back to baseline.
That is critical slowing down in action. Mathematically, it's a predictor that a phase transition, a bifurcation is coming. A major episode, a shift in the landscape, is imminent. And the key is we can detect this sluggishness in the data before the full episode hits.
That's absolutely incredible. It really is the radar, seeing the rotation in the storm clouds before the first drop of rain falls. Okay, let's quickly touch on the third model, reinforcement learning, the agent model.
This model comes from computer science and treats the brain as a kind of prediction and reward engine. We learn by taking actions and seeing if we get a reward. If I go to a party and have a good time, my brain's algorithm updates. Parties. Good. Do that again.
Simple enough, cause and effect.
But in the reinforcement learning model of depression, there's a problem with the reward signal itself. They call it a blunted reward signal. The agent, the patient, goes to the party. Maybe they even have a good conversation. They laugh. But the internal update mechanism is broken. The brain doesn't properly record the win.
So the next time an opportunity for a party comes up, the brain's prediction is still, party as you planned, not worth the effort.
Exactly. The prediction is, why bother? The math of these models shows that the agent gradually stops exploring its environment because the reward signal has flatlined. It's essentially a learning disorder.
And what about for anxiety in this model?
Anxiety is often modeled as a habit system overriding a more rational, goal-directed system. The agent learns, maybe from a past trauma, the world is a dangerous place. That becomes a deeply ingrained habit of thought. Even if they go out into the world 10 times and nothing bad happens, the habit is so strong, so computationally cheap for the brain to run, that it ignores the new data. They are operating on outdated software that constantly overestimates threat.
Okay, these models are all fascinating, but they are still, they're models, they're academic. I want to know if this actually works on a Tuesday in February for a real person. This brings us to Section 5, the hurricane forecast in practice.
And the answer is yes. It is starting to work. We are seeing this shift in real clinics from being diagnostic, figuring out what you have, to being prognostic, figuring out what is going to happen next.
Let's talk about the specific evidence. The Smith et al. Study on bipolar disorder that was mentioned in the outline.
This is a landmark study. They use a technique called hierarchical Bayesian modeling. They took a group of patients with bipolar disorder and tracked very simple things via a smartphone app. Their self-rated mood, energy levels, sleep duration, nothing invasive, no brain scans, no blood tests.
Just simple daily check-ins, and they built a forecast from that.
They built an individualized mathematical model for each patient's unique dynamics. And they were able to predict the onset of a new manic or depressive episode, on average, 7 days in advance.
7 days. Let that sink in.
Think about the implication of that. In our current healthcare system, we usually only catch people when they are already deep in crisis. The phone call to the doctor comes when the person is saying, I can't get out of bed, or a family member saying, he just spent all our savings. The damage is already done.
But with 7 days notice,
Yeah.
you're calling that the grace period.
It's a massive game-changing grace period. You get a notification on your phone. Warning. Your system is showing signs of critical slowing down. Risk of mania is rising. You call your doctor. You preemptively adjust your medication. You give your credit cards to your spouse for a week. You make sleep your #1 priority. You board up the windows before the storm hits.
You're not stopping the hurricane, maybe, but you're preventing it from destroying the house.
Or at the very least, you are radically minimizing the damage. It completely changes the paradigm of mental health care from crisis management to preventive design.
And this leads right into the concept of GTAS, which I had to look up. It stands for Just-in-Time Adaptive Interventions, which sounds a little like corporate jargon, but the idea is basically your phone as a trusted, smart friend.
A very smart friend. A Jitai doesn't just send you a generic reminder to meditate at 3 p.m. It's actively monitoring your vector field, your data stream, in real time. Let's say the algorithm notices that your physical movement has dropped by 80%. You're staying in bed, and your screen time has spiked at 2 a.m. You're doom scrolling.
It recognizes a known relapse signature for you personally.
Right, and it intervenes in that moment. It sends a personalized text. Hey, it looks like a rough night. Remember that breathing exercise that really helped you last time? Want to try it for 2 minutes?
It's context aware. It's not nagging, it's responding.
And because that intervention is timed perfectly, at the very moment the system is becoming unstable and wobbly, the research shows its efficacy is significantly higher than just telling someone in a therapy session 3 days later, hey, you should try to do more yoga.
And then there's the last piece of practical evidence mentioned, the PAI, or Personalized Advantage Index. This one feels less like a forecast and more like a lab test for therapy itself.
It is. It's designed to solve the trial and error nightmare of modern psychiatry. Right now, if you are diagnosed with depression, a doctor basically has to flip a coin. Let's try Zoloft. 6 weeks later, that's not working. Okay, let's try CB2. 3 months later, that's not helping. Okay, let's try this other thing. It can take years to find what works.
In the meantime, you're just suffering. Your life is on hold.
The PAI is an attempt to fix that. It analyzes your specific symptom network structure. It compares your unique network to a massive database of thousands of other cases, and it outputs a probability. Based on your specific network structure, where your hub is insomnia, you have a 70% better predicted outcome with this specific type of therapy, CBTI, than with this class of medication.
It's Moneyball for mental health, using stats to pick the right treatment for the right person at the right time.
It is. It's about eliminating the soul-crushing guesswork.
This is all incredibly hopeful and, frankly, amazing. But I have to play devil's advocate for a second here. We're talking about reducing human beings, their deepest pains, their wildest joys, their entire inner life to vectors, nodes, attractors, and probabilities. Isn't there a very real risk of dehumanization here? Of turning people into just math problems to be solved?
That is the ultimate risk. That is the ethical tightrope we have to walk, and we absolutely must address the human element, because if we build all these incredible tools and forget the person behind the data point, then we have completely failed.
The outline for this section includes some direct quotes from patients describing these states. And
Visceral.
a patient describing mania said it was like having racing thoughts, like 4 brains chattering 19 to the dozen.
And a patient describing depression called it a void of color and talked about a pain inside so bad nothing physical could hurt you.
And the mixed state, which is often the most dangerous, unpredictable, conflicting symptoms.
These are profound qualitative experiences. The math cannot feel that pain. An algorithm can't understand what a void of color means. But the central argument for person-centered math is that the math can validate that pain in a way nothing else can.
How so? What does that mean, to validate it?
It comes down to this distinction between ideographic and nomothetic approaches.
Okay, you're going to have to define those $10 words for us.
Nomothetic is the old way. It's the search for general laws. All people with depression tend to have low serotonin. It erases the individual in order to find the average.
It treats you like a statistic in a group.
Exactly. Ideographic, on the other hand, comes from the Greek idios, meaning one's own, personal. It's the study of the individual case. It assumes your structure is unique and worthy of study on its own terms. When we map your vector field, when we identify your network hub, we are saying to you, your pain has a specific, unique geometry. We see it, it's real, we can map it.
So it's not saying you are broken in the same way as everyone else. It's saying, here is the blueprint of your unique terrain.
Exactly. It's empowerment. Imagine a therapist being able to sit down with a patient and show them a 3D model of their own attractor on a tablet. Look, here is that deep well you keep getting stuck in, and see this path here. This is the trajectory you usually take to fall into it. Next time, when you feel yourself on this path, you know you have a choice. You can steer left.
You're externalizing the monster. You're making it a navigation problem, not a character flaw.
That is the entire therapeutic pitch. The algorithm is a flashlight in a dark and confusing forest. It doesn't walk the path for you, but it can illuminate the cliff edge before you fall off. The math has to serve the empathy.
So let's try to bring this all together. It's been a journey. We started way out in the cosmos of abstract mathematics with singularities, these stopping points where the wind of the mind dies down.
We looked at the toolkit for analyzing them, using the germ to zoom in, the K-jet to find the shape, and the incredible technique of blowing up the dot to see the hidden flow inside.
Then we crossed the bridge from math into psychology. We saw how those singularities become the attractors that trap us, and how network theory shows us that the symptoms themselves can create a self-sustaining prison.
And we ended up right here with the smartphone in your pocket, using those exact same principles to predict the storm 7 days out and to offer help in the exact moment it's needed most.
It's a journey from the most abstract topology you can imagine to the most practical, intimate, life-saving application.
It really is.
And I want to leave everyone listening with one final thought to mull over. We kept coming back to this idea of the grace period, that 7-day warning before the hurricane.
The difference between reacting to a disaster and preparing for a challenge.
If this science continues to develop and become widespread, we are moving toward a world where we can see the skeleton of a breakdown before the flesh has to act it out. We stop being firefighters, constantly putting out crises. We become architects.
Architects of our own minds.
Yeah.
Designing a life that has the supports it needs to withstand the inevitable weather.
So here is the question for you listening right now. If you had that app, if your phone buzzed tomorrow and gave you a forecast with mathematical certainty that said the storm is coming next Tuesday, how would you live your life differently today? What would you do with your grace period?
That is the question.
Hey, thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.